When my daughters are not with me, do they still exist? When one says, this is all there is, does that mean if they are not appearing in awareness, like right now, they don't exist? Hey Dina, that's such a good question. And I'm sure it's quite scary for some people as well. So what's your experience? When your children are with you, do they or don't they exist? When, did I say not with you? So when your children are not with you, do they or don't they exist? What is your experience there? So everyone can do that. If you don't have children, then you can use other family members. Like, so ask yourself this question. If my family are not with me, do they or don't they exist? So a friend of mine once told me he had 2 kids, 7 years apart. And he told me that with both kids, he witnessed them go through the same dynamic where they, first of all, had a toy, and they'd just look at the toy, interest in the toy. Then they would look at the toy and throw the toy on the floor, look at the toy, throw the toy on the floor. Then they would look at the toy, throw the toy over the head, and over the head, and over the head. Then, eventually, this is like at 1 year old or 1.5, they would turn around and look at the toy, throw it over the head, and look at the toy. Then the next and the last stage is they would throw the toy over the head and then cry because they no longer had it. So what happened in that process is the brain learnt or registered that it exists when I don't see it. In the beginning, when the baby threw it over the head, it didn't have that sense that the toy exists when I don't look at it. It didn't perceive that. But at some point, the brain registered that it was there by checking. So that's a really interesting these parts. So when the baby, at first, when the baby chucked the toy, it was gone. And it was not there, it was gone and did not exist. But then the baby could remember that it was behind it and then cried because it could imagine not having the toy. So this is a big human suffering, is that we have all this imagination of all these other things that are out there. So we've got England, America, Australia, India, Kazakhstan, Russia, the sea, the ocean, the moon, the galaxy, the universe, stars, sun. We have all these things that exist in our imagination. So we can imagine that there is Australia right now. So most people won't be watching from Australia because it's really bad time for them. It's like 3 a.m. for some, between maybe 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. I'm not sure of that time zone, but they're in front of us. So we can all imagine that there's Australia and that people live in Australia. And we can all imagine that there's other people watching this now. So that's what happens, is that we sit here and we imagine this Australia. And it creates a lot of suffering, this imagination of other. But what's your actual experience? Right now, Does Australia exist for you? So maybe if in Google Chat, YouTube Chat, you can say whether it exists or not. I presume they're in quite the same time. There is somebody from Australia watching, us represented right here. So is there anyone that can answer that question? Does Australia exist now to you? Does Australia exist? And the answer is no. Australia does not exist to you now. Australia is only an imagination. So, with your kids, do they exist when you don't see them? And the answer is no. They only exist as an imagination. They're only as a thought or a concept. So when your kids leave your presence, they're only a thought or a concept. For a lot of people, when the kids are in front of you, or the family members are in front of you, you're only seeing them actually as a thought or concept. You're not actually truly seeing them. So when there's identification, you're not actually normally truly seeing them. It's like a thought or an imagination that you're seeing. And this is when you don't really love the person when you see them as a thought and imagination, because you're not seeing them for who they truly are, and you're seeing them for conditions which fit with your conditions. So you've got an idea of who you are, and then an idea of who they are in relationship to you, and you're not really seeing them for what they are. So for example, somebody told me the other day that I was the most worrying person that they had ever met. Like that I worried loads. And when they said it, it hurt that they said it, but instantly I knew that what they were saying really was that when I often spoke to them, there was worry that arose for them. And their mind was instantly projecting it onto me. Like I know without doubt that I'm not that. This character isn't that. So that's how they saw me, is a warrior, because what happened in them, that's called projective identification. Not everyone does that, but it's they have a feeling or an emotion, and then they see the object of that feeling or emotion. In a way, everybody does that, but some people realize they're doing that and don't just totally believe it. So, and I can understand that I am in that way the most worrying person I've ever met. I've known them since childhood, and I can understand that I create sometimes a lot of anxiety in them, just because I don't follow the norms of life. And so my ideas can create anxiety, or my way of being can create anxiety to them. And then you can have the polarizing view, so you can have someone else that comes to these talks and has many awakenings, and then sees me as absolute love. And again, they then believe that's me, and it's not true. It's that they're beginning to see without the filters on. So with your children, Gina, you might actually not be seeing them for who they truly are when you're with them. So when you're with them, you might be seeing them as your imagination of them. You'll only ever truly meet your children and know your children when you're here in this moment as consciousness, when they are recognized for who they are, which is unconditioned love. And then the other part is secondary, the way in which their body has habits and conditions and ideas. But those do not make a person. Those are habits and dynamics that are ever evolving and changing and appearing and disappearing. And by the time you've grabbed them and thought about it, they've changed. Then you ever notice that, like, when someone upsets you, you see them completely different to when they make you happy? Like, so you see them as like almost a different person. Like, so if you feel really scared of someone, you see them as that, and then when they've made you laugh or you feel happy with them, then you see them as that.